recording now, excuse me. So today I'll be talking about bike sharing, more specifically the bike sharing revolution that's taking our cities by storm. I am an avid cyclist. I cycle around London to all my interpreting appointments, and I think bikes are extremely important. They're eco-friendly, they're wonderful. And in London, more and more you see more and more bike sharing schemes. They're becoming extremely popular and they're just growing exponentially. And there are many, many wonders of bike sharing, but since we're in the technology and energy segment, I'll be focusing more on the technology behind them and essentially how the bike sharing schemes work. So there are two main types of public bike sharing schemes. The first type is the more traditional of the two, and this is the type that began in Paris and was named Velib. And this was about 10, 12 years ago. I'm sure you're all familiar with this kind of bike sharing. It's the one that uses bike docks. It's found in myriad cities all over the world, and I think now there are about 1,000 such schemes, these bikes, the bike sharing schemes using bike docks. They've had varying success. In Seattle, for instance, they're actually going to end the bike sharing scheme, I think in March next year, for various factors. It's a very rainy city, which is sort of inevitable, I guess. There are many hills. People don't want to cycle up hills. The government is making budget cuts, which is unfortunate, and they also implemented a mandatory helmet law, so everyone must wear helmets, which makes bike sharing very tricky. Another unfortunate example is Rome. I remember when I arrived in Rome for my Erasmus, there was a rather sad sight around the city of these empty bike docks, very sad looking bike docks with sometimes bits of bike stuck in the bike docks, like half a bike or maybe like a bit of bike just lying very strewn on the floor. And it turned out that the Roman regional government had some teething problems in rolling out their bike sharing scheme, and it only lasted in the end about 2 months, because within 2 months every single bike had been stolen. So I think they needed to sort out their technology a little bit more before rolling out that scheme. One success story, however, is in London, where bike sharing schemes are thriving. They started with the Boris bikes. They were initially called Barclays bikes, they're now called Santander bikes. They changed from blue to red, and it seems that more and more people every day are on the streets of London cycling around using these bikes, so that's great. So the technology in the bike sharing schemes that use bike docks makes use of, the technology is there to try and combat the risk of theft or damage, essentially. And it depends on the city, but essentially it works in the same way. You access these bikes using a code. This is generally for the more casual user, or a key, which is for the more regular users using these bikes every day. You can also do this more recently through apps. And this allows you can look on your phone in the app to check to see how many bikes are near you in any given bike dock. Say you live near 3 bike docks, you can see how many bikes are there. This is like a live update, so it's really helpful. The bicycles contain what's called a radio frequency identification device. This not only allows an even spread of bikes around the city, but it also enables the bike sharing companies to measure the amount of time between docking stations. So basically the time every journey is. Most bike sharing companies allow each user unlimited 30 or 45-minute rides, and then thereafter every 15 minutes has a sort of set fee. It's actually interestingly similar to the technology used in animal identification and hospital operating systems. So this is the technology that's used to keep track of individual animals on farms, but also foreign objects in surgeries and hospitals. So it's very, it's multi-use. The docking stations use a system of lights, so a kind of traffic light system, to indicate the condition of the bicycle. So if there's no colour on the traffic light system, that generally means that the bike is ready for a code input, so it's ready for you to input your code. Red means the bike is not available for hire, there's something wrong with the bike. Sometimes people are intent on destroying them, there'll be clearly something wrong, or maybe it's waiting for someone to come and fix it, the maintenance team. Amber or orange means that your account details are being checked, so after you input your code, and then green means the bike is unlocked. So moving on to the second type of bike sharing, this technology is a little bit more interesting, and it's certainly the more recent of the two types of bike sharing schemes, and this is the dockless bike sharing, so bike sharing that does not use a dock. This has taken Asia and America by storm in recent years, namely, well, really only over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, but it's actually fairly new in Europe, and the first UK city that the dockless bikes were rolled out in was Manchester, I think with varying success. I recently read that people were finding like piles of bikes just heaped up on top of each other, which is a bit sad, or taking bikes into their houses and never, just using them as sort of a personal bike. But it uses a similar idea as the other type of bike sharing, uses an app. So what users can do is they select a bike that they see on the map, just like Uber. So you go onto your app, you look for nearby bikes, and they'll sort of pop up like little Uber drivers. And the app then sends you a 4-digit code, which you can then type into a specially fitted wheel lock on the back of the bike. Or if you just see a bike on a street, on the street, you can just walk up to the bike and unlock it using your phone and a QR code. So you just hover your phone over the bike and it will unlock with a QR code. The big difference, obviously, is that there are no docking stations. So it enables users absolute freedom to start and end their journey wherever they fancy, provided that there is a bike at the beginning of their journey, where they want to begin their journey. When you finish your journey, you simply click the manual lock back into place and park the bike using a bike stand. And it sort of relies on the user putting the bike somewhere that's not very inconvenient. So it tries to give you little notifications saying, please don't park your bike in the middle of the road, this can be unhelpful. And in certain cities this has become a real issue, people just putting bikes willy-nilly wherever they fancy. So certain areas in cities have been what is termed as geo-fenced. And this means that bikes can only be used or locked in designated areas of the city. So you won't be able to manually lock the bike in specific areas. These bikes also use a GPRS, which is fitted onto the lock, so GPS on the lock, which means that the bike is visible on the network, which allows both the company to see it and for you to see it on the app. The app also allows you to report issues, so marshals can come along and fix the bike. These apps also rate users, so the aim is to kind of entice users into caring for the bike, and they do this with pricing incentives. So I think O-Bike is one of the companies and Ofo is another one of these companies. They're both Chinese companies, and it starts off new users when you download the app for the first time. It gives you 100 points, and these 100 points are O-Bike credit or Ofo credit. So if you do leave the bike in the middle of the road or somewhere very, very dangerous and you're reported or they see you do this, they dock some of your credit off, or if you damage the bike, equally this happens. And this means that the price to rent the bike per hour or per 30 minutes then increases. So it's quite sneaky, but I think quite effective, and it's what they have to do. So looking at the future of bike sharing, what is in store? Well, bike sharing in general has been picked up by countless cities all over the world. It's been labelled as a solution for smart growth and urban development. However, it's unfortunately far from seamless. There are now lots of cities, especially in the States, looking into how bike companies can become, or bike sharing can become a much more integrated part of public transport and not just on the fringes, so kind of introducing maybe a one-card-fits-all scenario that you could use on public transport, but also for bike sharing, and integrate it into public transport networks. Unfortunately, this means that it looks like prices are set to rise, as especially in the bigger schemes in bigger cities like New York and London, there are increasing maintenance failures. They have to employ a huge number of people to both ferry the bikes around and fix the bikes, and there are lots of technology glitches. These schemes often don't rely on state funds, so they're private companies, and it's hard to keep up with the costs. Beyond fixing bikes and docking stations, and sort of just tweaking the basic user experience, companies are also, as I said, focusing on the bigger pictures. They're wanting to also improve the connectivity for bike sharing users, enhance the app, etc. Some companies are also looking into the idea of electric bikes. This would allow bikes to be implemented in cities such as, again, Seattle. It could come back to Seattle because it would allow users to take longer and steeper journeys and just, be faster in general. Apps are also they want apps to provide more real-time information and to give users a better ability to try and report problems, because every app has its own way of doing things, and not every app is particularly user-friendly. Sometimes it could be quite complicated to try and report issues. So just generally improving the system. And it's hoped that, in the future, with further tech integration, someone getting off a train from, from in big countries like America, from Washington, DC to New York, for example, they'll have their card, they'll just one card for the whole of the country, and so they can easily hop on a New York City bike, whereas they might not necessarily even live in New York, but they just have a public transport card, so it's much more integrated. There are also plans to introduce built-in tablets to bikes. So these tablets could direct users to local restaurants and shops and provide train times, all the information you want, and this was recently trialled in Copenhagen. So all in all, it seems that bike sharing is shifting up a gear. Thank you.